Good morning, everyone. We're going to give you guys a couple seconds as everyone trickles in. Happy December. So, good morning, everyone, to today's Affinity call on FAFSA errors. I'm your host, Laverne Hanfield, Programs Coordinator with the Florida College Access Network. We have a great featured speaker joining us today. I'm thrilled to welcome Pedro Hernandez, who is the current Director of Outreach Services for the Florida Department of Education's Office of Student Financial Assistance, which is in charge of the federal loan portfolio as well as the nearly 30 state of Florida scholarship and grant programs. Pedro has been with the agency in this role since 2009. He graduated from Florida State University with a bachelor's in international affairs with an emphasis in economics and has over 20 years experience in financial aid, beginning as a work-study student in the financial aid office during his time at FSU. Throughout his experience, Pedro has held positions as a financial aid officer, a lender representative, and guarantor servicer. He's also been active in many local and national financial aid associations, such as the Florida Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, the Southern Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, and the Florida Association of Post-Secondary Schools and Colleges. We welcome you and thank you for joining us today. So before we dive into today's presentation, a few housekeeping items. If you're familiar with FCAN's webinars, usually all participants are muted during the webinar, but because of the format today, that might change later as we'd like you all to share some strategies on how you're boosting FAFSA completion at your schools. I'll go over those additional ways to participate later in the webinar. Feel free to use the questions and chat features in the box, which you should see on the right side of your screen if you're viewing from a desktop computer. We will allot time at the end for any questions, but you can submit them at any time, and I encourage you to do so. If you'd like to share any new strategies you're learning on your favorite social media platform, you can find us on Twitter at FL College Access, and please use the hashtags FCAN and FAFSA FL. Finally, this call is being recorded. All materials will be available within a week of the recording, though you can find handouts in the handout section of your control panel now. So as this is a new thing that we're launching here at FCAN, I'd kind of like to get into what these counselor affinity calls will be. This is a time specifically for counselors to come together to share your strategies with each other. Florida is a fairly large state, so aside from all the conferences that only happen once a year, you may only get to see what other schools are doing through various newsletters and email blasts. Hearing someone else talk about their program could spark an idea in you to add something to something you've already done or implement something completely new. So the intention of these calls is threefold. The first is to create a space for you to share your best practices for programs around FCAN's College Ready Florida initiatives in conjunction with the email blasts you get from me. Secondly is to highlight the great work you're doing in preparing your students for college and career. And thirdly is to provide resources from local and state partners like we're doing today with Pedro Hernandez from FAFSA. We hope to have some school counselors like yourselves as featured speakers on future calls, as well as local college access networks on how they can provide support for you if one is in your region or county. If there are topics you'd like FCAN to highlight in future counselor affinity calls, please make sure to fill out the post-webinar survey and let us know. And again, if you are familiar with FCAN, you know what the Florida FAFSA Challenge is. We are in the thick of that season right now. And it was created as a way to help boost FAFSA completion. It's a friendly competition between schools and districts to increase the proportion of high school seniors that are completing the FAFSA. The aim is for schools and districts to accept the challenge of increasing their completion rate by 5% higher than the previous year, or whatever goal fits your school. FCAN has multiple resources to support schools and districts participating in the FAFSA Challenge. We have the FAFSA Challenge Toolkit, which is a one-stop shop for FAFSA resources. the Florida FAFSA Challenge Dashboard, which schools and districts can use to track their FAFSA completion rates in real time, a handout on helping students with common FAFSA mistakes, which you can find in the handout section of today's webinar, and several past webinars such as FAFSA is not enough and No Dollar Left Behind, which talk about FAFSA verification and a community-based approach to FAFSA completion. We also have partner resources. If you need help connecting with a local financial aid expert or would like to request one for your financial aid night or workshops at your school, FAFSA can help through their Speakers Bureau, which if you would like a speaker at your event, you can contact Pedro for. Champions for Learning, a community organization in Collier County, publishes a document on helping students understand and work through the verification process. And Future Makers Coalition, a local college access network in Southwest Florida, created the FAFSA First campaign to create a culture of FAFSA awareness for both high school students and parents. FCAN recently launched the First Look FAFSA Dashboard, which shows currently FAFSA completions through November 22nd and will be updated every Monday. So those of you who have been seeing that in email blasts and were inquiring as to when it will be updated, it has been updated and it will continue to be updated weekly. This will expand to the full FAFSA Challenge Dashboard in the spring, which you can see on this slide here. And here you can see your school name, the county, the number of seniors enrolled for the school year, and a bar graph that shows your FAFSA completion. If you use the filter feature and deselect all counties and only select your county, you will see all the schools in your county populate. If you click on the bar graph next to your school, it'll take you to your school detail page, which looks like this. And on this page, you'll see the estimated number of Pell Grant money earned by students that have completed the FAFSA, as well as a pie chart of your FAFSA completion numbers and a side-by-side comparison to your FAFSA completion the year before. On the far right side of that screen, you'll see where it says difference. It'll show the calculation of your FAFSA completion rates this year compared to last year. And in this slide, it shows Florida's FAFSA completion was actually down compared to the previous year. So right now we have a poll question on what FCAN FAFSA Challenge resources do you currently use? We have the FAFSA Challenge Toolkit, the FAFSA Challenge Dashboard, the handouts that I mentioned, the past webinars, or any of our partner resources such as FAFSA Speakers Bureau. So we'll give you guys a little time, couple seconds to complete that poll. You can select all that apply, by the way, I forgot to say that part. If you use more than one, if you use all, select everyone that you've currently used in the past, whatever it may be. Great. You see a lot of people using the toolkit and the handouts. Oh, we see some engaging in the past webinars. That's great. So, yeah. Thank you guys, and I'll share those results. So as you can see, we do see a lot that are using, the FAFSA resources, the main ones that we see, the toolkit and the handouts, which is great. Those handouts, as I said before, are in the handout section, but we have numerous other ones as well as other partner resources on the FAFSA Challenge page, which you're free to download them and disperse them to students and families at your FAFSA nights. So thank you all for participating. And now we will hear from our featured speaker, Pedro Hernandez, if you're there.
Good morning, all. Just want to wish everybody good morning and welcome to the training. Hope that everyone can hear me. Just want to ensure. And to go with this training in regards to connecting with FAFSA errors and how we could correct those. And we're also going to cover the data sharing agreement. So in terms of participation, how you receive training, and review some of the home screens associated with it. So the next slide is, after our agenda, is what are exactly the common errors that occur. Now, these common errors are not only applied to FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, but also to the Florida financial aid application, and to also to a lot of times to actually admissions applications. So these are common errors, the most common errors that can be corrected. And then if we try to educate, to try to instill in our parents and our students to take these very, very seriously, because they pertain not only to and impacts their immediate future, but it also impacts their immediate economic future when it comes to financial aid. So let us quickly review some of these errors. The most common error is the proper spelling of first, middle, and last names. It is one of the most critical errors that we constantly see, both on the FAFSA and the Florida financial aid application. So a lot of times when John Smith, it always goes by Johnny, and he thinks that that's his given name, so he writes down Johnny. Make sure that he understands that John Smith is not Johnny Smith, but John Smith, and use his appropriate name that matches that social security number. In addition to that, the second most common error is the correct demographic information. Date of birth. A change in date, a change in month, and change in year drastically affects their overall criteria for meeting correct information for both the FAFSA and the Florida financial aid application. In addition to that, we use other criteria such as physical address and email addresses. Make sure that those are correct, not only because they are used to identify the student, but also in communicating with the student. If the student changes their permanent home address or their email address, a majority of institutions now, whether it's the U.S. Department of Education, whether it's us at the Florida Department of Education, or whether it's the institutions trying to contact them to get additional information by an email address, if the student has not updated that email address or is not checking it constantly, that information is going nowhere. And we want to ensure that students are on top, specifically during their senior year, when it comes to their correct demographic information. That's date of birth, email address, street address, vitally important. And if they ever need to change it, we'll we'll go into detail a little further on how that is done. Now, also, one of the most common mistakes is ensuring that students' parents are entering the correct first and last name as indicated. A lot of times students are used to writing their name as it comes. A lot of applications ask for last name first, then first name. Ensure that students are taking their time and entering the information that they are reading. First and last name interchange is one of the most common mistakes, and of course it causes mismatches, both for the Florida financial aid application and for the free application for federal student aid. Make sure those things are corrected. Also, ensuring the correct social security number or school identification number are entered. We always ask students and parents not to guess, to always have that information in front of them to actually confirm, so it matches up when they enter their social security number, the correct social security number, or the correct school identification number. Those are vitally important when it comes to matching up additional information from transcripts, from financial aid applications, from Florida financial aid applications. It is critical and vitally that they submit the correct information. And it is also vitally for transcripts that you have the correct social security or a school identification number for transcripts when they come in and get uploaded to our system. In addition, ensure that students are utilizing the same name for the Bright Futures application, the high school transcript, and their entrance exams. It's vitally important because, as you know, in order to meet all the qualifications we need for the Bright Future Scholarship, we need the Bright Future application, the high school transcript, and the entrance exams, the SAT, ACT, or PERT exams, to all match, and they are coming from different places. So in order to ensure, it is essential that the same name, the same social security number, or the same school identification number is utilized so we can compose and evaluate students. Vitally important. On the next slide, you're going to see um, they ensure that all parties, high school, students, and parents know the correct methodology to correct the biographical information. When we start with the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, that is a U.S. Department of Education application. So once the student fills out the FAFSA, if the student is a dependent student, they're going to need parental information. If the student has filled out the FAFSA and they needs to make any corrections, they need to contact the U.S. Department of Education. When the student fills out the Florida financial aid application, that is the Florida Department of Education application. They would need to contact us if they need to contact to update either their school that they're going to or contact us regarding any demographic information. High school counselors, also vitally important, that when they send the students transcript or they have any update for the student, if the student or if the student's information is being updated electronically via a batch file from your school, and we have different biographical information, that means name, social security number, identification, or address, and you send a batch file with students updating that information, and that information does not match, that information will error off, and therefore that student is not going to be evaluated for any state scholarships and grants until that information is corrected. We always ask that high school counselors contact us and make sure that we have the correct information when it comes to updating name changes, address changes, social security numbers, or school identification numbers, because that way we can ensure that once we have the correct information, we'll correct it on our end, and any updates from the school district or from counselors, whether they do it online or through a batch process, does update our system. It is vitally, vitally important. Now, it is also vitally important when it comes back to um, high school students and parents. When they fill out the FAFSA application, they're going to get back what's called the student aid report, a SAR report. Have them actually keep that information and have it confirmed. That student aid report is vital because it's going to have all the information that the student has submitted. It is essential that the student review that student aid information. That's the result of the FAFSA. If they need to make any changes, once again, they could contact the U.S. Department of Education, or they could go online and change that information so that it will be reflected appropriately. When it comes to the Florida financial aid application, when students complete that application, there is a results page. Have them print out the results page, have it readily available, have them jot down their password and ID number to access that information. Because once again, the student's going to have passwords and IDs for the FAFSA, the Florida financial aid application, and possibly for the school or college that they're attending. That is vital information that the student needs to be aware of and keep up-to-date information on. In addition, when we're talking about filling out those applications, we ask that students read the questions thoroughly, whether it's the FAFSA application, because the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA, asks very specific questions that drastically affect the student's eligibility. For example, if they're dependency questions, make sure that they're reading those correctly. Make sure that they're reading the name of households. Make sure that their income and what actually does and does not count as an asset for students and parents is actually submitted correctly. All of these factors matter when it comes to students and their eligibility for financial aid. Now, one of the important things that we want to reiterate again is, do not guess what their social security numbers are or their student ID numbers are. It is vitally important. And once again, save the results page. for both the FAFSA, which is the student aid report, the results page for the Florida Financial Aid Report, and any correspondence from the colleges, universities that they are attending or seeking to attend. And once again, ensure that the students complete both the Florida Financial Aid application and the FAFSA application. We know that even though students might not be going to school in the state of Florida, still complete that Florida Financial Aid application. It's an insurance policy. And now that students have up to 5 years to reinitiate their Florida Bright Future Scholarship, it is essential that they complete this requirement, because it is a requirement to complete the application in order to qualify for the scholarship. And the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA, it's also important because financial aid is any and all money from all four major resources. That's the federal government, the Florida Department of Education in this case. The third is the institutions themselves. It evaluates students for all levels of financial aid. So we highly suggest students, parents, and counselors to submit both the Florida Financial Aid application and the FAFSA application. They are not mandated, but we highly encourage it. Now, on the next slide, we're going to go over IB students, specifically when it comes to ACE or IB students. Those students who are in those programs, it does not automatically guarantee their Bright Futures Award. Students must still meet all the requirements. Specifically, if the students in the ICE program or IB program do not get an IB or an ACE diploma, they still have to make sure that they submit the service hours that are required, and not only submit them, but are documented by the high school guidance counselors so they can be submitted. Once again, submit the FAFSA and Florida financial aid applications by the stated deadline. In terms of, there are several state scholarships and grants that need to be completed by March 1st, which makes sure or ensures that they are evaluated for those specific state scholarships and grants. When it comes to the FAFSA, it has a stated guideline of August of 2021, but a lot of colleges, a lot of universities have a specific financial aid date that they want to ensure that those students are meeting that date in order to be evaluated for the upcoming year. They have FAFSA priority dates. Make sure that your students are meeting those dates and aware that those dates vary from institution to institution. So just make sure that they are aware of that. Now, when it comes to the next slide, the data sharing agreement. In terms of the data sharing agreement, the next slide will say, if your county does not participate, you can participate by providing me the name of your school district superintendent, the school district legal counsel, and the name of the chair of the school board. By providing me those three names, I will prepare an agreement, a data sharing agreement for that institution. We will provide it, we will send it to you. Once we receive, or the school district superintendent signs it, the school district legal counsel signs it, and the chair of the school board signs it and sends it back to us, we will initiate the ability for you to actually have access to this screen. And once it is signed, and you will also receive training from myself. On the next slide, you're going to see exactly what that means. So that means that if you gather that information, send it to me directly, I will once again put it together, send it back to you. Your school officials sign it, send it back to us, determine what schools are eligible for it or what schools they would provide that information to. Once I receive the signed copy from the school personnel, I will activate your district and those corresponding schools. On the next slide is, once you do start participating in data sharing agreement, any high school counselor can sign in at our website, floridastudentfinancialaidsg.org. The school counselor can actually go to the high school page, and under reports, you're going to see the Florida Financial Aid application and the FAFSA application. If your school has signed up, you will then receive a notification to actually, the next slide, that you could actually must agree to the statement by checking the box that you acknowledge that you are using the data as the terms outlined in the agreement. Once you check off yes, and you're going to have to check off every single time that you agree to it, you're going to then get to the next screen, which is the data sharing agreement. This is the report that you're going to receive. You're going to indicate the high school graduation year, because school counselors are going to have access to just your school, because that is how your access is granted. You're going to see this report, which is going to list all your students by last name, first name, date of birth, FAA status, and FAFSA status. Now, it's going to have all of this information. You're going to be able to click on either last name or first name, and it will sort in in alphabetical order, whether you want it by last name or whether you want it by first name. You could also click on the actual report header of the FFAA status, and it will tell you all the students who have completed the Florida Financial Aid application. Or you could go to the FAFSA status and actually click on that, and it will show you in order which students have completed it and which have not completed it and which are incomplete. That means the student went out there, but the student has not actually completed that FAFSA application. Now, if you go to the next slide, on the next slide, at the very bottom of your report, you're going to see all your demographic information. You're going to see the number of students with the FAFSA status who have completed it, number of students with the FAFSA status who are incomplete. That is students who actually went online, submitted the FAFSA, but did either not sign it or something is not complete with their actual FAFSA application. Now, on the report, you could actually click on it and it will tell you what exact students those are. So you can see which students have completed a FAFSA, which have an incomplete status, and then the next indicator is the number of students with FAFSA status as none. That means that they have not submitted at FAFSA whatsoever. The next indicator is the number of students with FAFSA status that have no social security number. That's that information available to you as well. Now, in addition to that, you're going to get the number of students with Florida Financial Aid status as A, that the Bright Futures evaluation is in progress. Now, we are only going to run those Bright Future evaluations after the 7th semester, which is during the January period, January of 2020, and after you submit your last high school transcripts of 2020 of your 2020 high school graduates. We'll also show you the number of students with FFA status of B. That means that the evaluation is in progress. So basically, if your school is set that all your students are currently being evaluated, it's going to show all the students that have submitted a Florida Financial Aid application. It's also going to show the total number of students with FFA status of 52. This is vitally important because this is the students who indicate if they completed a Florida Financial Aid application that they have committed a felony. Sometimes those students enter that information in error. If they have, you will be able to document and see what students exactly submitted a 52 error. And the last number is the total number of students with no Florida Financial Aid status. That means the rest of your students who still have not submitted information. Now, the next slide, please. Now, it is vitally important to understand that this report, when it comes to FAFSA, it is matching the students based on having a valid Social Security number on their FAFSA, on their high school transcript, or the Florida Financial Aid application. If the record or if your student does not have a valid Social Security number, we cannot match it to a FAFSA actually itself. Therefore, that student is not going to show up on this report itself. District personnel, that means your folks at the district have authorization and they could view all the schools one at a time. High school counselors at each individual school, because of your actual access, you're only going to have access to the students in your school. So you're going to be able to do the drop-down list for only your school. Next slide, please. The report also is only providing basic information about whether the student has completed the state application. It's going to say, yes, the student has or has not completed that Florida financial aid application. It is not going to determine whether the student is eligible for Bright Futures or any other state scholarship and grant. It's just going to tell you as a counselor that, yes, your student has completed the Florida financial aid application. It's also going to tell you, yes, the student has completed the free application for federal student aid. Once again, there are only going to be 3 indicators: completed, incomplete, and not completed. When it comes to completed, that means all the information was entered. It was provided to the U.S. Department of Education. They have processed that. Incomplete means that the student went online, submitted the FAFSA, but it was either rejected for numerous reasons. We don't know that reason, but we know that the student still needs to provide additional information to complete that FAFSA application. And if they have not done anything whatsoever, it's going to come in as on the report as not having done, not submitted. Also, vitally important, if the student is elected for verification, we do not show that status on our system. Once again, we are only showing whether the student has completed the Florida financial aid application, whether they have completed the FAFSA, whether they have not completed the FAFSA, or whether that FAFSA is incomplete. In addition, the students will not be included unless that they have, once again, a transcript to the state of Florida through FASTER. The student has either completed a Florida financial aid application or a FAFSA. If the student has no transcript or doesn't have any social security number on file, the student will not be listed in this specific report. Now, it can be listed in other reports, but when it comes to the data sharing agreement report, it will not be listed on that specific report. Next slide, please. Now, FAFSA matching, that when it comes to our information, you could contact us, and we have, once again, our website, Florida Student Financial Aid SG.org, is the website that students access to submit their Florida financial aid application. It is also the website that has all the state scholarships and grants that are listed. When it comes to the Florida Bright Futures link, we highly encourage counselors to bookmark that, because under the Bright Futures link, we're going to have the Florida Bright Futures Scholarship Handbook, which has 3 chapters: the initial eligibility, which is essential for all high school students to make sure that they know what it takes to qualify for them. We have our customer service number, both for students and for counselors. Our 888-827-2004 number is for those students who want to change or view their information, confirm that their information has been received. They could contact us. But more importantly, it is also for high school counselors or any counselor that could contact us, specifically when it comes to verifying a student's demographic information: name, address, social security number. If that information needs to be updated, please contact our office. We will ensure that that information is correct. So if you send a follow-up, either batch or additional transcripts with the correct information, it will match up. It will update that student's record. If we don't have it corrected, any follow-up transcript that you send, update that you send, will not update and correct that record. That's why it is essential that we communicate to counselors to please contact us so we have the most updated information for your students. And if you have any question whatsoever in regards to the data sharing agreement, any training for how to navigate these screens, any best practices, please contact myself. I am the Director of Outreach Services. I will set up an additional WebEx to go with you to specifically go through the report and make sure that you navigate it. You're able to navigate it, make sure that you're able to use it as a tool for FAFSA completion, to meet your FAFSA completion goals, to compete with the challenge, and more specifically to help and assist Florida students and Florida parents access their higher educational goals through all available financial aid available to them. So that is my presentation. If you have any other questions or concerns, I'll be here to assist you. You can once again contact me at any time, and I'll take any questions or concerns.
Thank you so much, Pedro. Now, we will be taking questions from the attendees. If you have any questions, please submit them in the questions box to the right if you're viewing, again, from a desktop computer. If we do have time today, which it looks like we might, we would love to hear, specifically hear from you all, to share some strategies that you use to boost your FAFSA completion in your schools, and how you're using the student level data from the data sharing agreement to help students through FAFSA errors. So if you would like to verbally participate, please raise your hand. You can use that feature in the dashboard, and I will unmute you and call on you for you to verbally share with us. Before that, however, we do have another poll question for you. So every year we see a lot of money, Pell Grant dollars being left on the table by students in Florida, across the country, from not filling out the FAFSA. In Florida alone, that's $100 million. And we are always encouraging families and students to file the FAFSA, yet sometimes we see, various reasons for why they're not doing so. So what are some reasons you're seeing students not file the FAFSA? Is it, parents don't want to provide their information to the government, families don't think they qualify for financial aid, students don't know what FAFSA is or what that lovely acronym stands for and what it means for them? Or, some students and families don't really think it's worth their time and effort, as we've been hearing that it's, time consuming. Ooh, wow. Oh, okay. So we do see, families don't think they qualify for aid, but we do see, I think someone inputted, students or parents are undocumented. That is a great note to make. Parents don't want to provide information to the government. We see that constantly as a fear that they may have. So I'm gonna close the poll and share those results with you all on, what you saw as some reasons for families and students not filling out the FAFSA. And thank you all for, participating in that poll. And right now, we will get into your questions that a lot of you have submitted. Pete, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think she may want you to expand on it more. Nicole would like to know, does a student have to have a social security number in the school system in order to view their FAFSA and Florida financial aid application completion?
When it comes to students, if they fill out a Florida financial aid application, they submit it to us. If the student does not have a social security number, that means the student can still submit a Florida financial aid application by indicating that they do not have a social security number or they do not have a student identification number. Our system will automatically assign them a pseudo number. It is essential that that student can still complete the Florida financial aid application, submit it to us, and we'll have that application on file. The student can contact us via our 888 number, and we'll be able to see and verify for the student that yes, based on his name, address, other criteria besides his social security number or student ID number, we can identify that student. However, when it comes to identifying that student on this specific report, our data sharing agreement, that student, because they don't have a social security number, will not show up on the report for FAFSA completion. Now, when it comes to submitting the The free application for federal student aid. If the student is undocumented, that means they don't have a social security number, they're not eligible for federal financial aid, they're, they are still going to be eligible for two of the four major resources for financial aid. Remember, the four major resources are, first and foremost, the U.S. Department of Education. They provide FAFSA, the actual Pell Grant, other states, other federal grants and scholarships, and student loans. When it comes to the state of Florida is going to provide, based on eligibility and residency, state grants and scholarships, which is the second source of financial aid. Third source is going to be the institutions themselves, colleges, universities, technical centers. And fourth and finally, private scholarships. If a student is undocumented, the student is not going to be eligible to submit a FAFSA, but they can submit a Florida financial aid application. But because they can't do that, they're not going to have access to submit the FAFSA, so they're not going to have access to federal funds or state funds. But still, we recommend those students self-identify, talk to the financial aid office at that campus, and see what is available to those students, because those students might still qualify for institutional funds based on that institution and private scholarship funds based on where the high school came from and any private scholarships at that institution. However, once again, for our report for under the data sharing agreement, those students will not be actually calculated or listed on our report because they don't have a matching social security number to match with the FAFSA to match to the transcript.
Right. Thank you. And sort of kind of as a follow-up to that question and your response, if a student doesn't have a social security number on the transcript, should they leave that blank, that field blank on their FFAA?
Yes, once again, for their Florida financial aid application, it is essential that students still can submit their Florida financial aid application utilizing a pseudo number. Now, when they submit and try to create a profile, it's going to ask them to, once again, enter a social security number. They're going to leave that blank. It's going to once again confirm that they are entering this application without a social security number. The student confirms, the system will then grant them that pseudo number so the student can actually submit their Florida financial aid application.
Okay. And I'm unfamiliar with this term, but this question says, will for work only social security numbers connect their FFAA to their FAFSA?
For work social security numbers. Now, it is vitally important that it's understandable that a lot of students, a lot of parents sometimes identify a tax identification number as a social security number, and that is not the case. When it comes to a social security numbers are assigned by the Social Security Administration Office. Those are the only valid social security numbers that to be utilized. Whether they were for work purposes, they can be utilized, but remember the student has to meet certain criteria of eligibility to qualify for federal funds and state funds. And that's vitally important because even though some students, some parents come in with work visas, they have social security numbers, but they're not going to be eligible for financial aid for federal and state. Once again, those students are still going to be eligible for institutional funds if available and private scholarships. But in that case, where work numbers, if there is a valid social security number, yes, those students can utilize it. But once again, they still might not be eligible for federal financial aid or state financial aid because they are not either U.S. citizens or eligible Florida residents.
Okay. And I know, as you just said, eligible Florida residents or U.S. citizens are the main demographics that we usually talk about. Would students who are here on asylum qualify?
It's going to depend. There are, when it comes to students who are in the progress, there are certain asylum categories within federal student aid that qualifies them for financial aid. That's going to be on a one-on-one basis based on the asylum request or asylum paperwork that they have. Normally, those students who have that information are going to be provided that information and are normally chosen by either the U.S. Department of Education or the post-secondary institutions for verification, and the student is going to need to provide the school that they're attending that documentation to make sure that the student is eligible for federal financial aid, state financial aid at that time.
Okay. I have a question here on students who've withdrawn from schools. So if they've gone from school A and they've gone to school B, they're still showing up on school A's tracking documents. Do you know why that is, or?
On their data sharing agreement?
Yeah, so a student has transferred to a different school, but they're still showing up on their initial school's data sharing agreement, dashboard, database information.
Correct. That is because a lot of times and this is going to be vary from district to district when it comes to who submits their transcripts and what we have on file for them. If the school's district has not cleared up or had us clear their entire student population and just says, we want just our seventh semester and eighth semester students listed, we're still going to list all the students that we have on file for that institution. So if that student is listed on a transcript, they're going to be listed on the data sharing agreement as well. So they could contact us, and we could once again they could contact our 888 number, and we can have them removed from the transcript from that institution. And once again, counselors can call in and hit the option to speak to a counselor specialist, and the specialist will assist the counselor at that time.
Okay. And I do kind of want to reiterate something that you had said earlier. If any corrections need to be made on the FAFSA, people need to reach out to U.S. Department of Ed, and if there's any corrections or information needs to be corrected or updated on the FFA to reach out to Florida Department of Ed.
That is correct. Vitally important that when it comes to correction, when students fill out the FAFSA application and they have any questions or concerns, direct those students directly to the U.S. Department of Education or their 1-800-4-FED-AID number or the 1-800-433-3243 number, whether it's dependency status, whether anything having to do with the FAFSA application itself. When it comes to the Bright Futures application, if the student contacts us or the counselor, they contact us, we'll be more than happy to assist them in either changing their school code, changing any information on their application, once we have confirmed that we are speaking with the student. When a counselor calls us, we highly recommend counselors to call us, specifically when a student has incorrect demographic information. We are talking about name, inverted name on their previous transcripts, date of birth change, a social security number, a student ID number, an address. If that information is incorrect on our system and the counselors are trying to submit changes by sending us an updated transcript via the FASTER system, when it gets to here to the Florida Department of Education, it's going to error off. Those students, those accounts, we highly recommend have the school, either the counselor or the secretary, whoever is responsible, to contact us, talk to the counselor specialist. Once we document the information is correct on our system or correct the system on our side, any follow-up transcript that the school sends will then update that student's account information to reflect all their transcripts, all the classes that they taken, test scores, all that information.
Okay, great, thank you. We are hearing a lot of questions about resources for undocumented students on asylums, different demographics aside from U.S. citizen. I would like to remind everyone that we have here at FCAN just updated the Florida FAFSA Challenge page with information about local scholarship portals, so you can check that out as a resource for those students to still get some financial aid from your various counties, various local communities. And if there are any portals that we are unaware of, please feel free to send them to us, as we'd love to get that information in front of others as well. And if you have any questions, please, reminders, send them in the questions chat, or if you specifically want to vocalize your question, please use the raise your hand feature. We touched earlier on the for work only social security number on the FFAA, and someone would like to know how that would show up on the data sharing agreement on that database.
Definitely. If it is a social security number, whether it's for work only, issued by the Social Security Administration Office for the student, we are going to show that on our system because it is a social security number. However, a lot of students, a lot of parents misconstrue or identify a tax identification number that they utilize for tax purposes as a pseudo social security number. And we want to just absolutely make sure that a tax identification number is not a social security number. It is solely that, a tax identification number to report income, to pay taxes on. It is not a social security number, therefore not issued by the Social Security Administration Office. Therefore, it is not a valid number, and it's going to error off at or when the student fills out a federal student financial aid form or the Florida financial aid application itself. So just want to make sure that when it comes to a work social security number, it is treated like any other social security number. It is their identification number. However, if it is a TIN number, a tax identification number, those numbers will error off and it will cause a mismatch for both the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, and for the Florida financial aid application.
Great. And as you said, that for work only social security number will show up on the FFAA, and it is attached to students' identity. It will show up, for example, as a complete FFAA.
Correct.
Okay.
If it is issued by the Social Security Administration Office.
Okay, gotcha. As we're winding down time today, I kind of, if no one else has any more questions, Pete, I'd love to hear some ways that counselors can maybe leverage this data sharing agreement to during the FAFSA challenge to assist students through FAFSA, through the FFAA, FAFSA errors, all those things.
Correct. In bringing the data sharing agreement and this tool that's available to all high school districts who want to participate or who have signed up and want to utilize it to its fullest potential, it is a list that you can actually download, and you're going to know specifically what students have filled out both a Florida financial aid application and a FAFSA application, if once again your district signs up for it. That information is readily available because it is vitally important to make sure that you are reaching out and talking to your students, talking to your parents who are eligible for financial aid. And it's also vitally important because once you have this tool at your availability, it has specific student information. Which of your students have filled out a FAFSA? Which of them have filled out a Florida financial aid application? Now, it also reverts back to you assisting as all of us in assisting students and parents understanding that when it comes to financial aid is defined as any and all money. That means federal funds, state funds, institutional funds, private scholarships, 529 college assistance plans. All of that is considered financial aid. And by filling out that FAFSA application and the Florida financial aid application, that is all financial aid funds. So there's not a single family in the state of Florida that says, you know what, we don't qualify for financial aid, because merit-based financial aid, such as the Florida Bright Future Scholarship, is considered financial aid. Grants and scholarships, whether they're given from the U.S. Department of Education, the state of Florida, the institutions, they're considered financial aid. Now, not all of those funds are need-based financial aid. That means some of those funds are not just based on the economic situation. They are based on numerous factors. So that is why we highly, highly encourage students to apply to the FAFSA, to the Florida financial aid applications. Also letting the students and parents know that when the students' parents fill out the FAFSA application, it is in no way demanding that they provide what's listed as the estimated family contribution. It is just a form to evaluate the students based on financial need, but also for all other financial aid consideration.
Great, thank you. And someone had a question on the ability to export the data sharing agreement information. Is that a feature
Yes, we are. We wanted to have and roll out for this year the ability to absolutely upload this information to a spreadsheet, have it in a printable format, and we are currently working with this. As the last project for the last 2 weeks, we have we are in the process of making that happen. Right now, you're only able to view that information and print it out as a print screen. But within the next week and a half, we're going to have the ability to actually export all of that information out, have it in a printable format so you could actually export it. But as of today, if you go online and just once again to the report headers, you could actually click on the report header. It will sort it in alphabetical order, whether it's first name or last name or reverse alphabetical order. It will tell you what students have completed the Florida financial aid application by clicking on the sort button. It will also go on the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. It will tell you which students have completed it, which have not completed it. But also if you go down, we want to ensure that at least you talk to the students who submitted that on that 52 question, on the 52 error. That means that they submitted the Florida financial aid application and indicated that yes, they had committed a felony. If that is not the case, you could identify which students those were, have them contact our office because we will need to clear that in order for them to be eligible for any state scholarships and grants.
Great, thank you. And for schools and counties filling out the data sharing agreement, is there a limited time, like a 5-year time frame they can use them, or once they have it, it's forever? Is there
Right.
a time frame?
Definitely. When it comes to our data sharing agreement, once the school district signs up to have access to this information, their district coordinator is going to have the ones who give them individual access, like they give them individual access to see the present bright futures evaluation and the access to see these reports. That report is on ongoing report until the school district calls us and says they do no longer want to participate. Then we'll turn them off at that time. However, even if they have not signed a data sharing agreement, counselors right now can still go in and look at your Florida financial aid applications and see which of those students have filled that out. The data sharing agreement is just intended for school districts to also view their free application for federal student aid or FAFSA applications that the student can and has filled out.
Thank you very much for making that distinction because I personally did not know. And does anyone have any last questions? I don't see any hands raised for anyone to verbally ask anything. If no one does, many thanks to you, Pedro, for presenting today and joining us on the call. And thank you to everyone who's here, participated. Enjoy the rest of your, I believe today is Wednesday, and the rest of the school semester, and happy holidays. Thank you all.
Thank you.